The sun was high in the sky and the city buzzed with life like it always did on a regular Tuesday afternoon. People were moving fast, some heading to work, others coming home, and a few just trying to get through the day like everyone else. The bus stop near the corner of 5th and Main was packed as usual. People stood in line, waiting quietly for the next ride. Among them stood a woman named Tasha. She wasn't looking for trouble, she never was. She wore jeans, a plain shirt, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Her hair was pulled back, and her eyes scanned the street, calm but aware. She had 2 kids at home, a job to keep up with, and not much time to waste. Waiting for the bus was just another part of the day. When the bus finally rolled up, people pushed forward, trying to get on quickly. Tasha stepped back, letting the rush pass before she climbed on. She dropped her card into the machine and made her way toward the middle of the bus. There was only one seat left, right behind the driver, so she took it. No big deal. Just a normal moment. But then he got on. He came in fast, almost like he was angry at the whole world. He wore dark sunglasses, a leather jacket, and boots that hit the floor hard. His presence changed the mood of the bus instantly. A few people looked away. Others sat still, hoping not to be noticed. He didn't sit down. Instead, he walked straight toward Tasha. "You're in my seat," he said, voice low but sharp. Tasha looked up. "Excuse me?" "That's my spot," he said again, pointing at the seat like he'd been there yesterday or something. She stayed calm. "It was open when I sat down." He didn't like that answer. "Move," he said, louder this time. People started glancing over. The bus was full, but suddenly it felt empty, like everyone was holding their breath. Tasha didn't flinch. "You can have it when I get off," she said, turning her head back toward the window. That was the wrong move. For him. He leaned in closer, standing over her now. "I said move. Now." Tasha turned back to face him. Her voice was firm, but quiet. "No." His jaw tightened. "You don't know who you're messing with." She gave him a long look, then slowly reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She didn't press record yet, but she held it up like she might. That made him even angrier. "Don't test me," he growled. "I'm not testing anyone," she said. "I'm just sitting here. If you've got a problem, talk to the driver." A man near the back whispered to his friend, "This ain't gonna end good." And he was right. Without warning, the man shoved her, hard. Tasha stumbled back, losing her balance. Her hands hit the armrests, but it wasn't enough. She fell off the side of the bus, landing hard on the pavement outside. The door was still open. People gasped. Someone screamed. The bus driver slammed on the brakes. Tasha sat up, slowly, dazed but conscious. She blinked a few times, shook her head, and looked up at the bus. Inside, the man who pushed her stared down at her like he was trying to figure out what just happened. His face was pale now, like he realized he'd gone too far. Tasha stood up, carefully. Her knee hurt. So did her pride. But mostly she was mad. Not scared. Not crying. Mad. She brushed herself off and walked back onto the bus. Everyone watched. No one said a word. She stepped right up to him. "You really messed up," she said, looking him dead in the eye. He tried to step back, but the seats blocked him. "I didn't mean to push you that hard," he mumbled. "No," she said, "but you did." By now, someone had already called the police. Another passenger showed the driver a video they'd recorded. Word was spreading fast. Outside, sirens began to wail. The man looked around like he was searching for a way out. But the bus doors locked once the cops arrived. 2 officers stepped on board. "Who pushed the woman off the bus?" one asked. All eyes turned to him. He raised his hands like he didn't know what else to do. "I didn't mean to. I just lost my temper," he said. "Step outside, sir," one officer said. As they led him off the bus, Tasha stood there watching. Her body ached, but her mind was clear. She had done nothing wrong. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't fought. She had just refused to be pushed around. And now, the world was going to see it, because the video was already online. Within minutes, people across the city and beyond were watching it, sharing it, talking about it. Some were furious, others were inspired, and a lot of women saw her and thought, that could be me. Back on the bus, the driver checked on Tasha. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, I'll be fine." But deep down, she knew this wasn't just about a bus ride anymore. It was about respect, about strength, about standing your ground when the world tries to knock you down. And in the days to come, that video would change everything. The bus was eerily quiet after the man was taken away by the police. Everyone seemed frozen in their seats, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. Some passengers stared at Tasha, curious, maybe even admiring, but no one dared say anything directly to her. It wasn't just shock, it was respect. She had handled herself with a kind of calm strength that most people only dream of having when faced with trouble. Tasha sat back down slowly, ignoring the stares. Her knee throbbed where she'd hit the pavement, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she pulled out her phone again, not to call anyone, not to check social media, but just to take a deep breath. The screen lit up with notifications. Already, people were tagging her in posts about what happened. Videos from other passengers on the bus were being shared online, and hashtags like "Respect Her Space" and "Mirroring Stand Your Ground" were starting to trend. She scrolled through them briefly, then turned her phone off. None of this mattered right now. What mattered was getting home to her kids. They were waiting for her. Life moved forward even after moments like these. Outside, the police officers finished speaking with the bus driver. One of them approached Tasha cautiously, notebook in hand. "Ma'am," he said, "we need to get your statement." She nodded and followed him off the bus. By now, a small crowd had gathered near the sidewalk. People whispered as they watched her walk past. A few nodded approvingly while others looked concerned. Someone handed her a bottle of water. She thanked them quietly before sitting down on the curb to talk to the officer. "What happened?" the officer asked gently. Tasha explained everything, the confrontation, the shove, how she ended up on the ground outside the bus. She kept her tone steady, almost matter-of-fact. There was no anger in her voice, just clarity. When she finished, the officer scribbled notes furiously. "We'll make sure this gets sorted out," he promised. "Do you want medical attention?" That fall looked rough. She shook her head. "I'm okay. Just bruised." The officer hesitated, then added, "You handled yourself well back there." Tasha gave him a small smile. "Thanks, but I shouldn't have had to." He didn't argue. He just nodded and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Meanwhile, the video of the incident spread like wildfire. Social media platforms exploded with reactions. Comments poured in from all over the country, and soon, the world. Most people praised Tasha for staying composed under pressure. Others condemned the man who pushed her, calling his actions cowardly and unacceptable. News outlets picked up the story within hours, turning it into national news. Back at home, Tasha's phone buzzed nonstop once she turned it back on. Messages flooded in from friends, family, and even strangers offering support. One message stood out. A teenager named Mia wrote, "Thank you for showing us how to stand up for ourselves. Without losing our cool, you're my hero." Tasha read the message twice, feeling a mix of emotions. Pride, yes, but also sadness. Sadness that standing up for basic human decency felt so rare these days. Still, she saved the message. Maybe someday she'd tell her own kids about it. Later that evening, Tasha finally made it home. Her 2 children greeted her at the door, hugging her tightly. They were too young to understand exactly what had happened, but they knew something was different. Their mom usually came home cheerful, ready to play or help with homework. Tonight, though she seemed quieter. "Mommy, are you hurt?" her daughter asked, pointing to the scrape on her knee. "I'm fine, baby," Tasha reassured her, kissing the top of her head. "Just had a little accident on the bus." Her son frowned. "Did someone hurt you?" Tasha hesitated. How do you explain something like this to an 8-year-old? Finally, she knelt down to his level and said, "Someone made a bad choice today, but I stayed strong, and everything will be okay." Her son nodded solemnly, satisfied with her answer. For now. After tucking the kids into bed, Tasha collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. She flipped on the TV, half expecting to see the incident replayed on the local news. Sure enough, there it was. Footage of the bus, blurry images of her standing up to the man, and commentary from reporters analyzing every detail. This case highlights the growing issue of harassment on public transportation, one anchor said gravely. Another chimed in. The victim, identified as Tasha Reed, has become a symbol of resilience in the face of aggression. Tasha sighed and muted the TV. Symbols and hashtags weren't what she cared about. All she wanted was to live her life, peacefully, without drama or danger. But she knew better than to think things would go back to normal anytime soon. The next morning, Tasha woke up early, as usual. She dropped her kids off at school before heading to the gym where she worked. As a personal trainer, as she walked in, her coworkers greeted her warmly, but there was something different in their eyes. Recognition. "You're all over the news," one of them exclaimed. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Tasha replied with a shrug. "It's just crazy, you know?" Her boss pulled her aside later. "Listen, if you need time off, take it, whatever you need." Tasha appreciated the offer, but she declined. Work was her escape. Helping people stay fit and healthy grounded her. Plus, she didn't want to give the incident more power over her life than it already had. Still, throughout the day, clients kept bringing it up. Some offered hugs. Others shared stories of similar experiences. One woman teared up while telling Tasha how inspired she was by her courage. Tasha listened patiently, grateful for the support, but overwhelmed by the attention. By the end of her shift, she felt drained. On her way home, she stopped by the grocery store to pick up dinner ingredients. Even there, people recognized her. An older man tapped her shoulder and said, "You did good, miss. Real good." She smiled politely, but couldn't wait to get back to the quiet of her apartment. That night, as she scrolled through her phone again, Tasha noticed something new. A GoFundMe page had been set up in her name by a neighbor. The description read, "Help support Tasha Reed, a brave mother who stood up against bullying and deserves justice." Thousands of dollars had already been raised. At first, Tasha felt uncomfortable. She didn't ask for this kind of help. But then she thought about her kids, about the long road ahead if the legal process dragged on. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to accept some assistance. After all, it wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who needed to see that standing up for yourself could lead to change. Before bed, she sent a heartfelt thank you message to the person who started the fundraiser. Then she turned off her phone and closed her eyes, hoping tomorrow would bring less chaos and more peace. But deep down, she knew the storm wasn't over yet. The next few days felt surreal for Tasha. Her life had shifted overnight, from being a regular working mom trying to juggle responsibilities to becoming a symbol of strength and resilience. It wasn't something she'd asked for, but it was happening anyway. Every time she stepped outside, people recognized her. Some offered kind words. Others shared their own stories of standing up to bullies, and a few even handed her small gifts, like flowers or homemade cookies. The attention was overwhelming, but Tasha handled it with the same calm grace she'd shown on that bus. Still, not everything was sunshine and support. As the news spread, so did opinions, some good, some bad. Online trolls started posting nasty comments about her, questioning why she didn't just move out of the way or accusing her of exaggerating the situation. One person wrote, "If she didn't want trouble, she should have stayed quiet." Another chimed in, "Why does this have to be such a big deal?" Tasha ignored most of it. She knew better than to let strangers' negativity get under her skin. But one comment stood out because it hit close to home. What if someone else gets hurt because they think fighting back is always the answer? That made her pause. Was she encouraging people to fight, or was she simply showing them that standing firm could make a difference? She replayed the moment in her mind. The shove, the fall, the way she climbed back onto the bus without hesitation. No, she hadn't fought. She'd stayed composed, refusing to escalate the situation. If anything, she hoped her actions would remind others that strength didn't always mean aggression. Sometimes it meant holding your ground quietly. Meanwhile, the legal process began moving forward. The police released a statement confirming the arrest of the man who pushed Tasha. They identified him as a local biker with a history of minor offenses, public intoxication, reckless driving, and a couple of bar fights. None were serious enough to land him behind bars for long, but this latest incident changed things. Pushing someone off a moving bus wasn't just reckless, it was dangerous. And given the racial slurs he used during the confrontation, hate crime charges were added to the mix. Tasha attended her first meeting with the district attorney assigned to her case. The DA was a middle-aged woman named Lisa, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. She greeted Tasha warmly but wasted no time getting down to business. "We're going to need you to testify," Lisa said, laying out documents on the table between them. "Your testimony will be crucial. We also have video evidence, witness statements, and the bus driver's report backing you up." Tasha nodded. Testifying wasn't something she looked forward to, but she understood the importance of it. Justice mattered, not just for her but for anyone else who might find themselves in a similar situation. "How long will this take?" Tasha asked. "It depends," Lisa replied. "We're aiming for a speedy trial since the evidence is strong, but these things can drag out. Are you prepared for that?" Tasha hesitated. Between work, raising her kids, and dealing with the media attention, her plate was already full. But she nodded anyway. "I'll do what I need to do." Lisa smiled faintly. "You're stronger than most people realize. Don't forget that." While the legal wheels turned, the public response continued to grow. Local leaders organized rallies in support of Tasha, calling for safer public transportation and stricter penalties for harassment. A city council member invited her to speak at a town hall meeting about her experience. At first, Tasha declined. Public speaking wasn't her thing, but after some thought and encouragement from her friends, she agreed to attend. The night of the meeting, the room buzzed with energy. Dozens of people packed into the space, eager to hear what Tasha had to say. When she walked in, whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone clapped, and soon the whole room erupted in applause. Tasha felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her composure. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I never planned for any of this," she began. "I didn't wake up that morning expecting to end up in the news or become part of a bigger conversation. All I wanted was to get home safely to my kids. But sometimes life throws challenges at us we don't expect, and when that happens, we have a choice to stay silent or to stand up." She paused, letting her words sink in. The room was completely quiet now, everyone hanging on to every word. "What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone," she continued. "No one deserves to feel unsafe on a bus or anywhere else. We need better protections for passengers. We need consequences for those who act violently. And we need to teach our kids that respect matters." By the time she finished, the crowd was on its feet cheering. Tasha stepped back, feeling both proud and drained. She hadn't set out to inspire anyone, but seeing the impact of her words gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. Back at home, Tasha tried to focus on normalcy. Her kids noticed the change in her schedule. More meetings, more phone calls, more people stopping by the house. But they adapted quickly. Her daughter drew pictures of superheroes rescuing buses, while her son declared he wanted to be a lawyer when he grew up. "So I can help people like Mommy," he explained earnestly. One evening, as Tasha tucked them into bed, her son asked, "Mommy, are you scared?" She kissed his forehead and shook her head. "Not anymore. I was scared at first, but now I know I did the right thing." Her daughter chimed in. "You're brave, Mommy." Tasha smiled softly. "Thank you, sweetheart. But bravery doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you keep going even when you are." Her kids thought about that for a moment before drifting off to sleep. Tasha lingered in their doorway for a bit, watching them breathe peacefully. For all the chaos swirling around her, moments like these reminded her what truly mattered. The weeks passed. The case gained even more traction. National news outlets picked up the story, turning Tasha into a household name. Talk show hosts reached out, asking her to appear on their programs. Community organizations invited her to lead workshops on self-defense and conflict resolution. At first, she turned most of them down, unsure how much more attention she could handle. But eventually she realized she could use her platform for good. She started accepting invitations, carefully choosing opportunities that aligned with her values. On one talk show, she spoke candidly about the importance of standing up for yourself, without resorting to violence. On another, she discussed the need for systemic changes to protect marginalized communities. Each appearance brought new supporters, new ideas, and new hope for meaningful change. Through it all, Tasha stayed grounded. She reminded herself daily that she wasn't doing this for fame or recognition. She was doing it because she believed in fairness, in justice, in making the world a little safer for everyone. But as empowering as it felt to make a difference, Tasha couldn't shake the lingering question. What about the man who pushed her? Would facing him in court bring closure? Or would it reopen wounds she wasn't ready to confront? For now, she focused on the present, on her kids, her work, and the growing movement inspired by her courage. But deep down, she knew the hardest part was yet to come. The courtroom was quiet when Tasha walked in. She hadn't been inside one before, not like this, and the weight of it hit her immediately. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Rows of wooden benches lined the walls, filled with people waiting to see what would happen next. Reporters sat in the back, notebooks ready, cameras poised. A few supporters had come too, including neighbors and co-workers who wanted to stand by her side. Tasha took a seat near the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her heart raced, though she tried not to show it. She glanced over at the man who had pushed her off the bus. He sat slouched in his chair, arms crossed, looking anywhere but at her. His lawyer whispered something into his ear, but he didn't respond. For a moment, Tasha wondered if he even remembered her face, or cared about what he'd done. The judge entered, calling the room to order. Everyone stood as he took his seat, then slowly settled back down. The trial began. First, the prosecution presented its case. They played the video footage from the bus, blurry but clear enough to show the shove, the fall, and Tasha climbing, back on board. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the clip ended. Even those who'd already seen it online couldn't help reacting. Next came witness testimonies. The bus driver recounted how the man had acted aggressively from the moment he boarded. Passengers described the tension, the shove, and the shock that followed. One woman broke down in tears as she recalled watching Tasha hit the pavement. Then it was Tasha's turn to testify. She stepped up to the stand, her legs steady despite the nerves swirling inside her. She swore to tell the truth, her voice calm, but firm. The prosecutor guided her through the events step by step, asking questions that let her explain exactly what happened. "Can you describe how you felt during the confrontation?" the prosecutor asked. Tasha thought for a second before answering. "I felt disrespected, not just because of what he said, but because of how he treated me. As if I didn't deserve to be there. As if my presence was an inconvenience. And after he shoved you, I was angry," she admitted. "But more than that, I was determined. I wasn't going to let him win." Her words resonated with the crowd. People nodded, some scribbling notes, others leaning forward to catch every detail. When the defense attorney cross-examined her, he tried to poke holes in her story, suggesting she could have avoided the conflict altogether. "Isn't it true," he said, "that you could have simply moved out of the way instead of escalating the situation?" Tasha met his gaze without flinching. "Escalating? Sir, all I did was sit in a seat that was available. If standing up for myself means escalation, then yes, I escalated." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel to restore order, but the message was clear. Tasha wasn't backing down. After hours of testimony, evidence, and arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. It felt like forever before they returned with a verdict. Tasha sat stiffly in her chair, her fingers gripping the edge of the bench. Her kids were home with a babysitter, unaware of the stakes. She wished they were here, holding her hand, but maybe it was better this way. When the foreman stood to deliver the decision, the entire room went silent. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts," he announced. A wave of relief washed over Tasha. She exhaled deeply, her shoulders sagging, slightly. Around her, supporters cheered quietly, mindful of the solemnity of the moment. The judge sentenced the man to 5 years in prison, citing the seriousness of his actions and their potential consequences. Hate crime enhancements added extra penalties, ensuring he wouldn't walk free anytime soon. As the bailiffs escorted him out, the man looked back at Tasha for the first time. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw something unexpected in his expression. Not anger, not defiance, but regret. Maybe he finally understood the impact of what he'd done. Or maybe he was just scared of what came next. Either way, it didn't matter to Tasha anymore. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. "How do you feel about the verdict?" one asked. "What's your message to others facing similar situations?" another chimed in. Tasha raised a hand to signal she'd answer, and the crowd fell silent. "I'm relieved," she began, her voice strong despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "Not because I wanted revenge, but because accountability matters. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. And now hopefully people will think twice before acting out of anger or prejudice." She paused, scanning the sea of faces before her. "My hope is that this case sparks real change. Not just in our courts, but in our communities. We need safer spaces, we need kindness, we need respect." Her words earned applause from the crowd. Someone shouted, "You're a hero!" But Tasha shook her head. "I'm not a hero," she replied. "I'm just a mom trying to live her life. But if sharing my story helps someone else find their strength, then I'll keep talking." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving the reporters behind. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages of congratulations and gratitude. Friends called to celebrate. Strangers sent heartfelt notes thanking her for inspiring them. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. That night, Tasha tucked her kids into bed earlier than usual. She needed a moment to herself, to process everything that had happened. As she sipped tea on the couch, she scrolled through social media. Hashtags like "Justice Served" and "BR Respect for All" trended nationwide. Memes praising her courage popped up everywhere. Someone even created a mural of her in downtown captioned, "Standing Strong." Despite the accolades, Tasha knew this wasn't the end. Winning the case didn't erase the fear she'd felt that day, or the pain of knowing such. Incidents happened far too often, but it gave her hope. Hope that speaking out could make a difference. Hope that standing up, even in small ways, could inspire others to do the same. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet of her apartment wrap around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to advocate for change. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest, to breathe, to heal, to dream of a world where buses felt safe and respect came naturally. The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind for Tasha. Her life had changed in ways she never imagined. Every day brought new opportunities, interview requests, speaking engagements, invitations to community events. People wanted to hear her story, not just because it was dramatic, but because it resonated deeply with so many. It wasn't about revenge or anger anymore. It was about resilience, justice, and standing up when it mattered most. One morning, as Tasha sipped coffee, at her kitchen table, she reflected on how far she'd come. She hadn't planned to become an advocate or a public figure, yet here she was. The GoFundMe page set up by her neighbor had raised over $50,000, money earmarked for legal fees, and starting a nonprofit focused on safety and self-defense for women and marginalized communities. At first, the idea of creating something so big felt daunting, but now it seemed like the next logical step. Her kids sat across from her, munching cereal and chatting about their plans for the weekend. They didn't fully grasp the impact of what their mom had done, but they knew she was doing important work. "Are you famous now?" her son asked innocently. Tasha chuckled softly. "Not exactly, but I'm trying to help people." Her daughter chimed in. "Can we help too?" That question stayed with Tasha all day. Could her kids help? Should they? She didn't want them exposed to the harsh realities of the world too early. but maybe there was a way to involve them indirectly, through volunteering, learning empathy, understanding the value of kindness. For now, though, she kept those thoughts tucked away, focusing instead on the task ahead. Later that week, Tasha attended a local community meeting organized by city officials. The topic, improving safety on public transportation. Dozens of residents packed into the room, eager to share their experiences and ideas. Some recounted close calls they'd had on buses and trains. Others talked about feeling unsafe late at night or being harassed while commuting. One elderly woman tearfully described how she avoided riding altogether after witnessing a violent altercation months earlier. When it was Tasha's turn to speak, she stood up slowly, her presence commanding attention without effort. "I'm here today because I know what it's like to feel unsafe," she began. "But I'm also here because I believe things can change. We can make our buses, trains, and streets safer, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who uses them." She outlined several proposals: better lighting at bus stops, increased security patrols during peak hours, emergency buttons inside vehicles that connect directly to police dispatch, and mandatory sensitivity training for transit staff. Each suggestion earned nods of approval from the crowd. When she finished speaking, applause filled the room. Afterward, a young man approached her, his hands shaking slightly as he introduced himself. "I saw what happened to you on the bus," he said. "It gave me the courage to report something similar that happened to me last year. Thank you." Tasha smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're brave for speaking up. That's how we start making changes." Moments like these reminded her why she kept pushing forward. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about creating a ripple effect, inspiring others to take action in their own lives. As word of her advocacy spread, Tasha received invitations to appear on national talk shows. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready for such a large platform. But after consulting with friends and mentors, she decided to embrace the opportunity. If sharing her story could reach even one person who needed to hear it, then it was worth it. On one show, the host asked her directly, "What advice would you give to someone facing harassment or bullying?" Tasha thought carefully before answering. "First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Second, don't hesitate to ask for help, whether that's calling authorities, reaching out to loved ones, or seeking support from organizations dedicated to helping victims. And finally, remember this: standing up doesn't mean fighting back physically. Sometimes it's about staying calm, holding your ground, and refusing to let fear control you." Her response struck a chord with viewers. Social media lit up afterward with hashtags like "or trust your instincts" and "stand strong" trending nationwide. Messages poured in from people thanking her for giving them tools to navigate difficult situations. One woman wrote, "Your words made me realize I'm not alone. I've been too scared to speak up, but now I think I can." Reading messages like that fueled Tasha's determination. She started working closely with local nonprofits to develop workshops aimed at teaching self-defense and conflict resolution skills. These weren't just physical techniques. They emphasized de-escalation, communication, and knowing when to walk away versus when to stand firm. At the first workshop, held in a community center gymnasium, participants ranged from teenagers to senior citizens. Tasha led the session with patience and care, ensuring everyone felt comfortable asking questions or sharing concerns. By the end of the day, attendees left feeling empowered, armed with practical knowledge they could use in real-life scenarios. Despite the progress, Tasha couldn't ignore the lingering challenges. Not everyone supported her efforts. Critics accused her of exaggerating the problem or using her platform for personal gain. Online trolls continued posting hateful comments, questioning her motives and mocking her achievements. Some even suggested she should move on and stop talking about the incident. But Tasha refused to let negativity derail her mission. Instead, she leaned on her support system, family, friends, and the growing network of allies she'd built along the way. Her best friend reminded her often, "You're not doing this for them. You're doing it for the people who need hope." And hope was exactly what she provided. Schools invited her to speak to students about anti-bullying initiatives. Businesses sought her guidance on fostering inclusive workplaces. Even lawmakers reached out, asking for input on proposed legislation aimed at enhancing public safety. Through it all, Tasha remained grounded. She celebrated small victories: a new law requiring security cameras on all city buses, a partnership with a tech company to develop panic buttons for transit apps. But she never lost sight of the bigger picture. Change took time and setbacks were inevitable. Still, every step forward counted. One evening, as she drove home from another long day of meetings and interviews, Tasha found herself reflecting on the journey so far. She thought about the man who had pushed her off the bus. He was serving his sentence now, likely attending therapy sessions and anger management classes as part of his rehabilitation. While she didn't forgive him entirely, she hoped he learned something from the experience about accountability, empathy, and the consequences of his actions. More importantly, she thought about the ripple effects of that single moment. How one act of courage had sparked conversations, inspired movements, and brought people together. How strangers had become allies, united by a shared desire for justice and respect. Pulling into her driveway, Tasha glanced at the mural downtown through her rearview mirror. It depicted her standing tall, surrounded by symbols of strength and unity. Someone had painted the words, "Respect starts here," beneath it. She smiled faintly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chances to make a difference. But tonight she allowed herself to rest, to dream of a future where no one had to fight alone. Months had passed since the trial, and Tasha's life had settled into a new rhythm. The initial chaos of media attention and public appearances had slowed down, but her work continued. She poured her energy into building the nonprofit she'd dreamed of, a safe space where women, children, and marginalized communities could learn self-defense, conflict resolution, and advocacy skills. It wasn't easy. There were days when funding fell short, volunteers dropped out, and doubt crept in. But every time she felt overwhelmed, she reminded herself why she started this journey in the first place. Her kids noticed the change in her too, not just because she was busier, but because she seemed happier. They helped out whenever they could, stuffing flyers into envelopes or handing out water bottles at workshops. Her daughter even made posters for an upcoming event, proudly declaring, "Be brave, be strong," in bold letters. Watching them grow into compassionate, confident individuals filled Tasha with pride. Maybe one day they'd carry the torch forward, continuing the fight for respect and safety in their own ways. The grand opening of the nonprofit's community center came. On a crisp autumn morning, Tasha stood outside watching as people streamed in, families, activists, local leaders, and curious neighbors eager to see what all the buzz was about. A banner hung above the entrance reading, "Empowerment starts here." Inside, tables were set up with pamphlets, resources, and sign-up sheets for classes. Volunteers bustled around, greeting guests and answering questions. When it was time for Tasha to speak, she stepped onto a small stage at the front of the room. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to her. She took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. This wasn't just another speech. It was a celebration of resilience, unity, and hope. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady but warm. "This place represents more than just a building. It's a promise to ourselves, to our families, and to our communities that we deserve to live without fear, that we have the power to stand up, speak out, and support each other." She paused, scanning the faces before her. Some nodded in agreement, others wiped away tears. "I didn't start this alone," she continued. "None of us do. Every single person in this room has played a part, whether by volunteering, donating, spreading the word, or simply believing in what we're trying to achieve. Together, we've created something special, something that will make a difference." Applause erupted, echoing through the room. Tasha smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to truly enjoy the moment, to let go of the weight she'd been carrying and celebrate how far they'd come. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the cleanup was underway, Tasha sat on a bench outside the community center. The air smelled faintly of fallen leaves and fresh paint. Streetlights cast soft glows across the parking lot, illuminating clusters of people still chatting enthusiastically. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages of congratulations and thanks. One message stood out, a note from a young woman who had attended one of Tasha's earlier workshops. "I used to think I couldn't handle confrontations," the message read. "But after learning from you, I realized I'm stronger than I thought. Last week, someone tried to intimidate me on the subway. Instead of freezing up, I stayed calm and asked for help. Thank you for teaching me that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about acting despite fear." Tasha read the message twice, her chest tightening with emotion. This was why she did what she did. Not for recognition or praise, but for moments like these, when someone found strength they didn't know they had. As she tucked her phone back into her pocket, a familiar figure approached. It was Lisa, the district attorney who had handled her case. They hadn't spoken much since the trial, but Lisa's presence now felt comforting. "You've done incredible work," Lisa said, sitting beside her. "Not many people turn pain into purpose the way you have." Tasha shrugged modestly. "I just wanted to make sure no one else had to go through what I did." Lisa nodded. "And look at what you've accomplished. You've inspired a movement. People are talking about safety and respect in ways they weren't before. That's huge." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars peek out from behind clouds. Eventually, Lisa broke the quiet. "How are you holding up? Really?" Tasha hesitated before answering. "Some days are harder than others, but most of the time, I feel hopeful. Like maybe, just maybe, things can get better." Lisa smiled. "That's all any of us can ask for." Over the next few months, the nonprofit thrived. Classes filled up quickly, drawing participants from all walks of life. Workshops expanded to include topics like mental health awareness, bystander intervention, and digital safety. Local businesses donated supplies and services, helping keep costs low. News outlets covered the center's success, highlighting stories of transformation and empowerment. One story, in particular, caught Tasha's eye. A teenage boy named Elijah had attended one of the self-defense sessions after being bullied at school. He learned techniques to protect himself physically, but more importantly, he gained the confidence to report the bullying to his teachers. When the bullies were held accountable, Elijah became an advocate for anti-bullying programs in schools. His mom sent Tasha a heartfelt letter thanking her for giving her son a second chance. Reading that letter reminded Tasha of her own journey. How standing up for herself had opened doors she never imagined. How refusing to stay silent had sparked a chain reaction of positive change. She pinned the letter to a bulletin board in her office, alongside photos of smiling workshop attendees and notes of encouragement from supporters. 1 year after the incident on the bus, Tasha returned to the same stop where it all began. She hadn't planned to visit, it just happened. As she stood there waiting for the bus, memories flooded back. The shove, the fall, the anger, the determination. It felt surreal to be here now, knowing how much had changed since that day. When the bus arrived, she climbed aboard, nodding politely at the driver. The seats were mostly empty, save for a few passengers scattered throughout. She chose a spot near the window and gazed outside, watching the city pass by. Despite everything, she still loved this place. The hustle, the diversity, the resilience of its people. A young girl sitting across from her caught Tasha's eye. She looked about 8 years old, clutching a backpack tightly. Her expression was wary, almost fearful. Tasha leaned forward slightly, offering a gentle smile. "You okay?" she asked softly. The girl nodded hesitantly. "Yeah." Tasha reached into her bag and pulled out a small card, one of the nonprofit's flyers. "If you ever need help or just want to talk, this place is here for you, okay?" The girl accepted the card, her eyes widening slightly. "Thanks," she whispered. As the bus rolled to a stop, the girl got off, clutching the card tightly. Tasha watched her disappear into the crowd, wondering if the gesture would make a difference. Even if it didn't, she knew she'd done her part. Sometimes, planting a seed was enough.